Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining us again from the United States. It's great to have you on. Speaking of steel,
Great, thanks for having me.
so Laura, you're MEPS's US market analyst, and you've been following very closely the developments with Nippon Steel's proposed takeover of US Steel in recent months. In fact, it's gone on for more than a year now. But recent developments have very much come to a head. Can you outline exactly what the situation is now and the chain of events that we've seen in recent days?
Sure, it really has been a busy week, especially given a relatively quiet holiday week that was happening at the time. But the big news, of course, was last Friday when President Biden decided to block the Nippon-US Steel deal for national security reasons. Following the report handed down to him by CFIUS, the Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States. But before that, it even got there was a lot of news was even circulating before that. Due to the pending deadline that was coming, President Biden needed to make that decision by January 7th. And so earlier last week, Nippon Steel decided to really come out and try to, and vowed to not reduce production capacity in key facilities across 6 states over the next 10 years without approval from the U.S. government. They really did this as a last-ditch effort to combat the concerns around national security. Clearly it wasn't successful, and of course Biden 3 days later did decide to block the deal. And really what that meant was that he ordered them to abandon the deal within 30 days from last Friday. It got even more interesting yesterday with Nippon Steel and US Steel jointly filing 2 lawsuits in US courts. The first one was against the US government. They were looking for the fact that the U.S. government violated their due process rights. So that is what the first case is revolving around. And the second one was against the U.S. Steelworkers Union and Cleveland Cliffs for really preventing the deal to go through. The word collusion was used in various media outlets and in the case itself. But effectively, they were saying they inhibited the deal. They prevented the deal from moving forward as well. So, and interestingly, the lawsuit named the CEO of Cliffs as well as the president of U.S. Steel explicitly in the case. So that should be interesting to watch moving forward. So it was indeed a very busy week last week, and all 3 of those events just happened within the last 7 days.
So I see that US Steel and Nippon jointly have released a statement which sort of clearly outlines their beliefs that have led to these legal filings, and it seems quite clear, having seen this raised as a topic as a presidential election topic for several months now, that they feel President Biden was compromised in the way he approached the CFIUS investigation and his subsequent ruling. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say. It is fair to say. But the next steps will be even more interesting, I think, as well. There's not really a way to understand, and I'm certainly not a lawyer, as to which way these cases will end up. But I do think it leads to 2 things. One, Nippon Steel is not necessarily walking away from this deal, at least right now. And 2, it is going to this ongoing deal, or this potential deal is not going away in the next 30 days either. Court cases do tend to take a while to proceed, so there's really going to be an extent. This is not over yet, I guess, and it's not over yet.
It seems a fairly unprecedented series of events, really. But is there much likelihood that this decision will be overturned? Certainly, Nippon and US Steel seem very confident at this stage. They have no plan B.
That is true. They do still continue to say they are very confident that. Okay, maybe I'll take the word very. They are confident that this deal will go through. I'm not a lawyer, and I've read through some. U.S. Steel outlined their reasons in a detailed manner on their website. If anyone's curious to go look at their investor press releases, I think it was yesterday they released that. But there were parts to this, the first case that seemed to make sense to me, and it is namely that President Biden did come out against the deal. Even before CFIUS had started their own investigation and review process. So he had come out against it in March of last year. So, that seemed to resonate at least with me. But keep in mind that the lawsuit itself, the lawsuit against the U.S. government, is not necessarily asking for the decision to be overturned. They're asking for a new and fair review by the CFIUS group. So that is what they're asking for in that lawsuit. And, there could, again, I'm not a lawyer, but there could be some merits to, instructing the CFIUS review, which will be a new group of folks come, January, presumably come the inauguration day, which is in less than 2 weeks, that they want, they're requesting a new and fair CFIUS review without the weight of the U.S. election that happened last year.
Yeah, and of course, this would be conducted for deliberation by a new U.S. president, of course, who seems potentially a little more reserved about partnerships with overseas entities than perhaps Joe Biden was.
Yes, he is, but at the same time, President Trump has been touting that he's been asking and inviting foreign investment into the United States. So I do think that could be a wild card in the next steps. So he has come out and said that any company willing to invest more than $1 billion, which Nippon Steel was certainly, it was almost $3 billion, that they would get the green light in terms of approvals and permitting and regulations to move forward. So, he has been touting foreign investment. At the same time, he has been very against, U.S. Steel being under foreign ownership.
Well, we've said this before in the Speaking of Steel podcast. In fact, Donald Trump is someone who likes a deal. So if he pulled this off with a few concessions, I suppose that could happen.
That is certainly I'd say a possibility, maybe a remote possibility, and certainly a wild card in terms of next steps for the U.S. Steel Nippon deal to go through.
So as it stands now, and I'm conscious that MEPS's focus clearly is the U.S. steel market, the steel prices, and the market dynamics. Where does this leave U.S. Steel itself? Because it sounds like this would be a very protracted process now, potentially in the courts. So where does it leave U.S. Steel's operations and its workers now?
That's a tough one. I mean, because you said it's been the merger has been or the acquisition's been trying to go through for more than a year, but really this process started at the end of last summer when Cleveland Cliffs submitted a bid as well as others, and then they finally decided in December on Nippon. So this has been going on for quite a while, and I mean, for what we just said, it could go on for at least another quarter. So that just kind of leaves things in the lurch. But I will say, if the lawsuits are not successful and the deal is abandoned, I do think that the most likely outcome of all of this is that U.S. Steel decides to continue to pull back on or take offline their blast furnace capacity in the Midwest. I say continue because, this has been really a slow decline of their production capacity in the Midwest over at least over the last decade. Headcount for U.S. Steel in the U.S. market was over 22,000 workers just a decade ago, and at the end of last year, or early 2023, we were down to about 14,000 workers. So this has been a slow decline already. And I would suspect, as well as they have promised, that they will, continue to just pull that offline and focus on their big river project down in Arkansas, which is, of course, an EAF production, a mini milk production facility down in Arkansas.
So, I mean, that project itself would see capacity grow quite considerably, wouldn't it, from that particular site?
Right. I mean, they of course they started off with about 3 million in capacity, annual capacity there on flat rolled, and it's their Big River 2 project has just begun production this last quarter. So with an estimated, another 3.3 million in capacity coming online in the future.
Okay, so there is growth potential already in US Steel, and that despite the recent decline, that there is some promise there. I think President-elect Trump, I should say, recently posted in light of these recent filings that US Steel shouldn't be sold because the incoming tariffs that he'll introduce might make it even more successful and more profitable. So I guess that's something to watch in the future months.
Right. I mean, he has promised that he will make U.S. Steel strong again through both tariffs and tax incentives. So that is something he has been very somewhat vocal about in the last few months.
So I wonder, just in sort of wrapping up a little bit, Laura, really, if you could just give us a bit of a perspective on where the US steel market is from a MEPS perspective. Clearly, MEPS talks to contacts across the industry and has a real good handle on where things are as we enter 2025. So against what background is this being played out?
Yeah, all of this is playing out against a backdrop of, lower steel demand right now, or low steel demand and prices for that matter. But we do see a change coming in 2025. We are expecting both prices and demand to start to improve as we move across the first half of this year. And it really is due to, lower interest rates. That's going to help spur more investment, both construction and auto consumption by U.S. consumers. So we are hoping that the lower interest rates that have been pushed through over the last 6 months will start to lead to higher steel demand. And with that, prices, of course. And of course, there is also the threat of tariffs. Now, we haven't assumed necessarily that the tariffs will come into play in the U.S. market yet until they happen. But is that threat of tariffs that should start to reduce imports? We've already seen some of that over the last month. And as well as just other pending trade cases that are out there, the large core steel trade case. But we will, that should reduce supply and really help prices improve. We're not necessarily thinking they're going to go back to where we were just a year ago. If you recall, just in the tail end of 2023 into the first month of 2024, we had some strong steel prices return. We're not expecting that to happen over the next six months, but we are expecting some improvement. That said, there's a lot of risk. I mean, some of which we just discussed today over the near term in 2025. I think it will be an exciting year to watch U.S. steel markets and really globally. But we do need to watch closely some of these risks, and things could, either move higher or lower, depending on how some of these things play out.
Well, I know you're part of the team that we're keeping very close tabs on that.
Yes.
So I guess people just keep an eye on MEPS reports and on the website as well for updates.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, really fascinating topic to explore with you today, Laura, and it's something that we'll clearly continue to cover, and I'm sure we'll speak again about it in the coming months. But thanks ever so much. Thanks ever so much for the occasion for joining me. It's been great to chat to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.